Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990s Represent. We're in our second cycle of 1997, talking about a movie in this episode. In this episode, we're talking about Roby and Michelle's high school reunion. Don't know exactly why I'm wearing this shirt. Probably it's because it's the most, like, the zaniest, most colorful shirt I have, and it felt fitting to wear this for this episode based on some of the kind of zany costumes that Roby and Michelle wear in this film. Um, Definitely, I don't want to say guilty pleasure, but like, because I don't think you should feel guilty if you like something. So it's kind of like that kind of movie, though. It's just a fun time, pretty short runtime, like an hour and a half or so, and it's just a very good comedy. It's kind of in the same vein as for me as like A Night at the Roxbury, where I can just throw it on and I know I'm going to have a good time, and I'm not going to be putting a whole lot of time into it. Like Night at the Roxbury is like I think like less than an hour and a half. This was about an hour and a half, but it's an hour and a half of kind of like just a fun time. It's an 80s movie. It's also a 90s movie because there's a whole bunch of flashbacks to the 80s in it. So it kind of has like almost like a Wedding Singer vibe to it, where the Wedding Singer is a 90s movie but takes place in the 80s. This is a movie that takes place in both the 90s and the 80s because it takes place over, or they're in high school, and then 10 years later is their high school reunion. So it's like basically 1987 roughly, when the flashbacks happen, and then 1997 when the movie is actually going on. Um, awesome film. I didn't see it initially when it was in theaters, and I think I remember seeing it kind of in like either like the very late 90s or maybe like early 2000s, because I don't think it even hit DVD until like 1999. Um, so I want to say maybe I saw it in like the early 2000s. It's kind of like a cult hit. It did fairly well at the box office, but it kind of definitely picked up like a cult following like after that. I have some notes here about it. We're going to go through the notes, and then we're going to just kind of discuss the film and all that. Let me just find the actual page here. There we go. So, Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, first released April 25th, 1997. Um, Through my research for this, I did not know this, but the characters of Romy and Michelle are actually from a play from 1998 called, or 1998, 1988 called Ladies' Room. Robin Schiff was the writer on the film. Basically, also wrote that play. Um, both Robin Schiff and Lisa Kudrow were in the Groundlings comedy troupe. I remember hearing a lot about that comedy troupe when I listened to, I think it was like Chris Kattan's autobiography. I listened to that on like Audible. I want to say that was like 2019, maybe 2020 when I listened to that. But he was in that group as well. But a lot of like kind of big name comedians have come out of that theater group. So they did this play, basically called Ladies' Room, that had the characters of Romy and Michelle in it. Apparently, they also did a TV pilot called Just Temporary that also had Lisa Kudrow. I don't recall exactly who played Romy initially, but that they did the pilot. The pilot didn't get picked up, but then eventually, after Wayne's World came out, the idea of doing a Romy and Michelle movie was kind of back on, because apparently the studio wanted something to be like akin to a female version of Wayne's World. So they brought Robin Schiff back in, and then she wrote the script over like a period of time from basically said it took 5 years to develop the actual script. It's like I said earlier, it's kind of a cult classic. Like I said, I didn't see it in theaters initially, but definitely picked up a cult following. The soundtrack to this movie is also excellent. There's actually, I think, three versions of the soundtrack. There's a soundtrack, and then shortly after the movie came out, they did another soundtrack, and then I think they did one that was just both those soundtracks together. Let me actually bring up the soundtrack listing here really quick, and we'll see if I can find it here. Let's see here. So let's see, soundtrack. for this film. Like it's got like a lot of good '80s hits, and then also some more recent, not recent for when it came out, things as well. Let me just pull. Oh, here we go. Soundtrack. So there's the original soundtrack, which is the one that came out kind of like right before the movie came out. Then they did a more music from the motion picture soundtrack, and then eventually the double feature, which is basically I think like kind of like a mashup of both soundtracks. But the original soundtrack has, let's see here, 11 tracks on it, and this is a pretty good like '80s soundtrack overall. So you have "Our Lips Are Sealed" by the Go Go's. You have "Venus" by Bananarama. There's always something there to remind me by let's see, by Naked Eyes. Also, Burt Bacharach's in that as well. You have Dance Hall Days by Wang Chung, Turning Japanese by the Vapors, Blood and Roses by the Spillerines, Karma Chameleon by Culture Club, I Want Candy by Bow Wow Wow, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle, and We Got the Beat by the Go-Go's. I think, let's see, after that, in the other one is Be My Lover. Yeah, Be My Lover is a more recent song on there, and it's interesting because Be My Lover is both on the soundtrack to Romy and Michele's high school reunion, as well as the soundtrack to A Night at the Roxbury. But the more music from the motion picture features Everyone Have Fun Tonight by Wang Chung, Bad Case of Lovin' You by Robert Palmer, Whip It by Devo, Staying Alive by Entrance. That's more of a like a kind of like I think I heard that song maybe in like 1995, maybe it was 97 when I first heard that. But Staying Alive by Entrance. You have She Blinded Me with Science by Thomas Dolby, Cruel Summer by Bananarama, No One Is to Blame by Howard Jones, Stepping Out by Joe Jackson, You Keep Me Hanging On by Kim Wilde, I Think We're Alone Now by Tiffany Darwish, Be My Lover, that's LaBouche, that's also on Night at the Roxbury, and then Together Forever by Rick Ashley. And then finally, the other, I think this is kind of, let's see if this is there anything different on this? I think it's just a mashup of both. Yeah, so you got Be My Lover, I Think We're Alone. Yeah, so this other soundtrack is, so there's 11 tracks on the original one, 12 tracks on the second one, and then the total tracks on the third one, which is like the double disc one, is 21. So that one is just a mashup of the two soundtracks. But the soundtracks are great. There's also a bunch of songs in the soundtrack or in the movie that aren't featured in the soundtrack. And it's interesting because like the opening track of the opening scene basically, or even in the opening credits is No Doubt, Just a Girl. That's not on the soundtrack. It's in the film, but not on the soundtrack. So the songs that were not included are Just a Girl by No Doubt, YMCA by Village People, Robert Palmer's Addicted to Love, Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper, which is weird because that's a kind of that song takes place during a kind of a somewhat critical part of the film, during one of the flashbacks. Ain't No Love, Ain't No Use by Sub Sub. Let's see what else we got here. We got Footloose by Kenny Loggins, Hello Trouble by Desert Rose Band, and Don't Get Me Wrong by The Pretenders. And let's see, Have a Good Time by Towie Crew. But probably the songs my favorite songs of the movie or in the scenes that they work in are Don't Get Me Wrong by The Pretenders. That song, it comes on at like a really, just the way it's used in the film is done really well. And then of course Time After Time. Time After Time, like kind of surprising that that's not in there, even though I think it said they spent like a ton of money to license the song for the movie, but maybe not enough to maybe get it on the soundtrack. I'm not exactly sure. But the soundtrack is quite incredible. Apparently, there's talk of a sequel happening like sometime soon. Like I remember reading an interview with Mira Sorvino, like and it was like from maybe like in February where she was saying that they're working on the script still. So that's going to be interesting. I don't necessarily know if this movie needs a sequel. To me, it feels like kind of like A Night at the Roxbury, where it works very well or pretty well as a like self-contained film. And I don't know exactly what you do with a sequel. Do you have them go to like another high school reunion? Because in this one here, it's their 10-year reunion. Do we have it be like their 40th reunion or something like that? I don't really know. So it's just kind of like maybe a thing where it probably doesn't need a sequel. And then I remember reading an interview with Alan Cumming where he was saying something to the effect of if Romeo and Michelle was a male-driven film, like male characters going to their high school reunion, it probably would have already had a bunch of sequels and all that. But I don't really know how I feel about a sequel. If they do one, I'll probably see it because I enjoyed this one so much. But it's kind of like the thing where like they do a movie and then they do a really bad sequel to it. Like I never got around. Like a few cycles back, we did Dumb and Dumber, and I didn't see the prequel, so they did Dumb and Dumber in '94, and then in 2003 or so they did Dumb and Dumberer or whatever it was called, the prequel, and then I think in 2014 they did a Dumb and Dumber sequel, and apparently the sequel, like Dumb and Dumber 2, but it was TOO, was just really bad. Like Dumb and Dumber, I think like the original 1994 film is a comedy classic, I think, and apparently like the sequel, like 20 years later, like 94, yeah, in 2014, I think is what it was just awful. So like I could see a sequel to Romy and Michelle's high school reunion falling into that kind of trap if the script isn't good or anything like that. So I'm hopefully optimistic, I guess is the term, if they actually do the sequel, because Mira Sorvino seems to think it's going to happen. Because apparently, like, and I think I don't know if Lisa Kudrow's on board with being a producer, but I think from what I remember reading somewhere that Mira Sorvino was signed on as an executive producer for the sequel as well, if it actually happens. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But if they do it, I'll probably see it, or at least wait and see what the reviews are like. Really good thing about this movie is it's, like I said earlier, it's an 80s film and it's a 90s film, and then also pretty much like every kind of bit that they could pay off pays off. Like there's like a thing like that happens earlier in the film, and then there's a callback to it that totally pays off the thing in the beginning of the film. So also let's go take a look at the cast. The cast in this movie is spectacular. Let me actually just pull up the cast here. So of course, in the title roles, you have Mira Sorvino and Lisa Kudrow, just perfect. They have amazing chemistry together. They basically play very well off each other. Probably, though, I would say probably like Lisa Kudrow and Mira Sorvino definitely carry the film. But probably my favorite supporting actress in this film is, I'm probably gonna mispronounce his name because I'm terrible at it. But you have Janine Garofalo, I think I got it, as Heather Moody, who is one of their classmates, and I think she kind of steals every scene she's in. She's incredible in the film, probably my favorite of the supporting cast. You have Alan Cumming as well; he does really well. Julie Campbell. You have Vincent Ventresca. You also have Cameron Manheim and Eileen Hendricks filling out the cast there. You have Justin Theroux in this as well, and those are the big ones there. But just the cast is it's really a really well casted movie. The chemistry between all the characters is pretty good. And now we're going to get into the plot of the film. So basically, the plot of the film is they go to their high school reunion. That's basically it. But they both are. I think Michelle is unemployed. Roby works at like a car dealership as like a cashier. But they live together. They've been basically living together since high school, basically, or since graduation, I should say, 10 years prior to that. And one day, while at work at the car dealership, Janine Garofalo's character comes up and she's like, "Hey, like you go to the reunion," and then she's like, "Oh, I didn't know we were having a reunion," and then so she calls Michelle, and then they start getting ready for the reunion. They start training and getting into shape and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a bunch of flashbacks to them in high school, and they were kind of bullied by what was called like the A group. And there's a whole subplot with Janine Garofalo's character and Alan Cummings' character, how they're both kind of like more academic. But Sandy Frank, who is Alan Cummings' character, has a huge crush on Michelle. And then Janine Garofalo's character, Heather Moody, has a crush on Sandy and all that. There's constantly a character who is showing up whenever Janine Garofalo tries to smoke cigarettes. And this is the character played by Justin Theroux. He keeps flicking the cigarettes at her. He's like, "Hey, you got a light?" He just flicks it and leaves. But yeah, like Romy and Michelle are basically kind of bullied throughout high school, or at least in the flashbacks that we see. Michelle has a back brace at one point where they basically put magnets on it and things like that. They're just kind of all kind of just jerks to them. But they start going to the clubs, like working out, trying to get better, or trying to get a job. Like Michelle at one point is unemployed, so she's trying to get a job. She goes to like various, like I think like a Versace, um, not dealership, that's like a car thing, but like a Versace store to work, and they don't hire her. She eventually like is supposed to work at some kind of discount mart. She ends up not doing that. But then they basically they just feel the need to kind of embellish their past. So their whole big lie is that like they invented post-it notes, and the lie is quickly like spotted by I think like Heather shows up. And she's like, oh yeah, like, and I don't think anybody even really technically believes it, but she's like, oh yeah, I invented post-its, and Janine Garofalo's character is like, oh no, you didn't. No, no, she didn't. Like some guy named Art Fry from 3M invented those. So their lie kind of gets exposed. There's a whole thing where they basically have a falling out over like, well, I'm cuter. She's like, no, I'm cuter. I'm cuter. Like, well, I come up with all the ideas and you steal my ideas. There's this weird dream sequence which I actually kind of forgot about the dream sequence on my most recent watching it. Like, I was like, then I'm like, oh yeah, because like you see people like floating. Yeah, like one guy floats about like through a car. I'm like, oh yeah, this is this weird dream sequence because Lisa Kudrow's character like falls asleep in the car, and then wakes up at the reunion. But there's like a whole a dream of the reunion where like they're kind of fighting, and then like it shows them as old women and they're still fighting. Kind of like a way to basically be like, hey, like don't like let this anger like go through the whole your whole rest of your life kind of thing. Um, but basically they go to the reunion. The bullies that are still there are kind of still making fun of them, like like 10 years later, and they're kind of putting on this lie about like we're business women, and then like they kind of are like, let's just go out there and be ourselves, and they show back up with their iconic dresses, and Mira Sorvino's character Romy just gives this huge like speech to I think it's like Chrissy. Yeah, Chrissy. Let me bring up the character's name here. Let me see. Yeah, Christy Masters, who's basically the league leader of like the bully group, basically, and she's like, "We don't like you. We think you're a bad person." Like all this other stuff. She's like, "What's your problem?" And like, we don't give a flying f what you think. It's a really well delivered line, and like I like that the camera zooms into Mira Sorvino's face, and she's like, "We don't give a flying what you think of us." And then Sandy Frank shows back up. It's Alan Cummings' character, who's now like super rich, has a helicopter, and he wants to dance with both of them. So they basically dance. They fly off in the helicopter. But the stuff that gets paid off, like, is um, Janine Garofalo goes back out to have a cigarette, and Clarence, that's the cowboy character, shows up with like a ready to light a cigarette. He's like, I was a jerk in high school. Like sorry for all that. So they kind of call back to that. In the previous flashback, um, Billy, I think, like Mira Sorvino's character, Roby asks him to dance, and I kind of think he probably would have, but he's going out with Christy Masters. He goes with her. He's like, hey, like that girl over there just asked me to dance with her. What should I do? Like, so I feel like he's kind of, I mean, he's kind of a jerk by like being like connected to Christy Masters, but Christy is probably much worse. But they kind of leave Romy and Michele like at the prom, and that's the whole time after time thing I mentioned earlier comes on. But he's now like married to her, like works for her father's company. It's kind of funny because Christy Masters kind of embellishes what he does. He's like, oh yeah, my husband's in retail, or not retail, real estate development, making it sound like it's like more than what it is. And he's like, well, I just do drywall for her father's construction company, so it's like kind of like whatever. But then he's like, hey, do you guys want to get a room? And then he's like, Romy's like, yes, go get that room, and it will be up in like 5 minutes. And they kind of leave him hanging, like they left, like he left them hanging, kind of earlier in the film. That's what I meant by a lot of the stuff coming around to, like bits being paid off later on. So it all kind of works out. And then the end of the film is Romy and Michele working at their clothing store that Sandy Frank had helped basically set up. So they're basically designing clothes, selling clothes, kind of doing their dream. But that's kind of where the film ends. So that's basically like a wrap up of the film. It's a lot of fun. It's streaming right now. I want to say I watched it on Paramount Plus. Don't know how much longer it'll be on there or if it's ever going to come off, but like Paramount Plus has this movie on it. I also have it on DVD. That's where I watched it like years ago. I want to say it's probably been about 12 years since I've actually sat down and watched it, and I had a really good time on this most recent rewatch as well. But yeah, it's highly recommended. Definitely go ahead, and I would recommend checking out Romy and Michele's high school reunion. Like I said, it's a very lightweight, just fun kind of comedy. It's a comedy. It's like a buddy movie. It's also like a high school movie, so it's kind of got all those kind of things going for it. But it's definitely a fun time. So that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again in a few days doing a video game from 1997, and then we'll be moving into 1998 and the rest of the 1999 after that. But again, that's it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.